Okay, so today we're on day number 2 for the review. So if you haven't done day number 1 review, go back, do day number 1, then come to this. Also, if you haven't done the questions and you immediately went to the video, stop, go back, do the questions. Also, if you're watching this and you finished the questions and you got, let's say, all of them right but number 10, don't watch how I solved number 1. Go immediately to number 10. Okay? So we're going to start out with doing the first problem. So the first problem is this ranked rectangular problem. So the first thing I'm going to do is draw a rectangle. And now we know the perimeter of this rectangle is 146. So I know if I add up all of these sides, it should be equal to 146, because that's what perimeter means. Add all the sides, that's what it equals. Well, now they want us to find the dimensions of this rectangle. And so they say 7 yards less than 4 times the width. And so when you do this, you should go, oh, like, what is the width? So when I read that, I don't know what the width is. But I know it's a number. And anytime you know something's a number, but you don't know what it is, you use a variable. So we're going to say the width is W. Now, again, I don't know this other side because that's the same, so we'll just make that to be W also. Now we do know what the length is. The length is 4 times 7 less yards than the width. So when you read that, that's a little bit complicated, but it's not too bad to write because you know what 4 times is. That's like 4 times W. And a lot of people want to do 7 minus that, but if you do that and you think about it for a second, that means this width would be negative. So that's not good. We don't want to do that. When they say 7 less, they want you to minus that number from whatever this is. Well, if the bottom's 4W minus 7, the top is 4W minus 7. Now we're going to add up all the sides. Again, when I do this, I don't like to put pluses in between everything. I like to just count up how many W's I have because I think that's a little bit easier. So when I do that, I have 4, 5, 9, 10. So I have 10 W's. And then I like to count up my numbers right after that. So that's -7 and -7. That's -14. And then what we would do is we'd solve. So I'm going to add 14 to both sides so that I can get the W's by itself. So that's 10W equals 160. And I like to divide by 10, divide by 10. W equals 16. Well, that is my width. And so now that I got my width, what I want to think about is how do I find my length? And I would do that by taking my width and plugging it in to my length calculation, which my length calculation says take 4 times W and then minus 7. So my length would be 57. And that would be my answer. Let's try number 2. Okay, so for the second one, it's going to be a little bit different because now we have a rectangle again. But now they have different language. So we're going to just see how this one is set up. I'm going to go a little bit quicker on this one. If you still have some questions, go back and watch the first one. I think I do a better job at explaining every single step. So on the second one, what we're going to do is we're just going to find the perimeter again. So that means all the sides add up to be that. We don't know what W is or the width. And so on this, we know it's 3 times W more 5, which that would mean add 5. More just means add. So again, just like in the last problem, I count up my W's. So I have 3, 4, 7, 8. So I have 8 W's. And then I count up my numbers. 5 and 5 give me 10. And then what I do is I solve. So I subtract 10 from both sides. I get 8W equals 520. I divide by 8. I divide by 8. I let the calculator handle that instead of do that in my head. So I'd have W equals 65. Again, if you're asking yourself, how are you going to find length now? Well, this formula will tell me how to find it, which is 65 times 3. That's not a 3. Plus 5, which for us would be 200. So that would be my answers for those two. Let's do the next one. Okay, let's graph this inequality. the first thing you should notice about this inequality, and the first thing that I really notice, is that this is in standard form. And we don't want to graph out of standard form. So we're going to have to change it. To change it to slope-intercept form, we're going to have to move that x to the other side. So that's going to be y is less than or equal to negative 5x minus 1. And now what we're going to do is we're going to graph this line. So that line we're going to start out by graphing down here at negative 1. And then if you look at this, it's a slope, but it's not in fractional form. So you go, what is that as a fraction? Oh, I just put a 1 underneath it. So this would go down 5, so down 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and over 1. So that would be where my next point is. And then I draw a line to go through that. I made this line solid because that is an equal sign, so that means it's solid. And because it's a less than sign, it tells us to shade below. So I just shade below that, and that would be my equation and what it would look like. Let's do the next one. Okay, let's solve this equation. First thing when you solve this equation is you want to get all the a's to one side. So I'm going to subtract 6a so that it's on one side. You could subtract 7a also. I just like to make sure that I get a positive number, so it makes it easier for me. Then I'm going to move the 3 to the other side. I'm going to get a is equal to 6. That would be my final answer. Again, moving operators are adding and subtracting. So that's why I never use division to move that, because that's a separator. It would just separate the 6 and the a. So we wanted to move the whole thing over there. Let's try the next one. Okay, so for this problem, we have a fraction and a number and a 7. And we want to get x by itself. The way I deal with this is, again, when you're solving, you kind of want to go in reverse PEMDAS. There's ways around it, but it makes it a little bit trickier. So reverse PEMDAS would tell me to deal with this positive 3 first, or this adding 3. So we're going to subtract 3 from both sides. We're going to get 2x over 5 equals 4. And now how I like to think about this, instead of as a fraction, I like to think of it as two operations. This means to divide, and this means to multiply. So how do you undo dividing? Well, you multiply. So that's going to cancel out that fraction. And then we're going to get that side to be 20. And then how do I get rid of the 2? Oh, I divide by 2, I divide by 2. X is going to be 10. So that would be my final answer. Let's do the next. Now this one trips people up a lot because they think this minus sign means to subtract. And it does, but the 7 isn't really subtracting. The d is subtracting. So what we do with the 7 is, because it's a positive 7, and to move it to the other side, you actually subtract the 7. Then you get negative d is equal to 5. Do not lose that negative sign that's attached to the d, or that minus sign that is. And now we're going to get rid of that negative sign in front of the d by dividing by negative 1, because a negative divided by negative is a positive. So we're going to get d equals negative 5. And that is our final answer. Do not forget that this is, like, do not add the 7 over. Like, you could check that. Like, check that answer. Like, if you ever get an answer, you can always plug it in. Plugging that in makes sense here, because 7 minus negative 5 does give me 12. If you do the other one, it will not work out nice. Okay, so for this problem, normally, again, you want to deal with that positive 3, but you can't because the 5 is blocking everything. So we're going to have to deal with the 5 first. To undo that division, we multiply. So we're going to get 2x plus 3 is equal to 35. We're then going to minus 3, get 2x is equal to 32. Then we're going to divide both sides by 2 and get x is equal to 16. And that's how I'd get my final answer. Again, I would treat this as a division symbol and not as a fraction, and it makes it a little bit easier to deal with. Okay, for this one that we're trying to get by itself, you could distribute first, or you could get rid of the 4 first. Either one works. I'm going to add the 4 to the other side first, just because it makes it easier for me to think about. So I'm going to get 5x plus 2 equals 20. At this stage, since we are solving, you wouldn't necessarily have to distribute. You could divide by 5, but for this one, because I think we're more used to distributing, I'm going to distribute and get 5x plus 10 is equal to 20. I'm then going to subtract 10 from both sides. I'm going to get 5x is equal to 10. Then I'm going to divide by 5, and I'm going to get x is equal to 2. And again, the reason we're dividing is we're undoing the operations. But on this, make sure that you distribute to both numbers. Sometimes people only times the x, and that throws you off. Let's try the next one. Okay, so we need to write the line equation given that it goes to this point and is parallel to y equals negative 5x plus 2. So what I would do for this one is I would say, what's a line equation look like? Well, it looks like y equals mx plus b. So because it looks like that, what we're going to end up doing is we're going to replace what we know. Well, I know the slope. He said it's parallel to this, so that's the slope. So y equals negative 5x plus b. And because they gave me a point, I know that is x and that is y. So I can replace that. So instead of writing y, I can write 4. And instead of writing x, I can write negative 1. Which that means I'm going to have 4 equals 5 plus b. Then I'm going to minus 5 on each side. Get that b is equal to negative 1. Now, I know what b is, I know what my slope is, so I can rewrite my equation as y equals negative 5x minus 1, and that is my final answer. Try the next one. Okay, so for this problem here, we're going to write a line equation again. So we're going to say y is equal to mx plus b. We know it's parallel, so we know its slope is 7 over 3x plus b. We've been given an x and a y. They're both the same number, but that doesn't really matter. Now you have a fraction. To deal with fractions again, remember this means to divide and this means to multiply. So we're just going to kind of go around the circle and go negative 3 times 7 is negative 21. And then negative 21 divided by 3 is negative 7. Now I'm going to add 7 to both sides. I'm going to find that b is equal to 4. So my line equation will be y equals 7 over 3x plus 4. Try the next one. Okay, so now we have variables on both sides again. First thing I'm going to do is, because 3 and 7 are on the same side, you can just add them together, because 3x plus 7x is 10x. We're going to take that 2 and distribute it, so we're going to get 10x plus 2. Now we're going to subtract 10x from both sides to get everything together. And we're going to get that 1 is equal to 2. And you should look at that and go, nope. So put no solution. Anytime you get something that doesn't match up, it's no solution. If you would happen to get 2 equals 2, then that's an all solutions case. But in this one, 1 doesn't equal 2, so no solution. Try another one. Okay, it says, what is the slope of this line? So the slope of this line, when we kind of look at this, I don't know from standard form. But I would know if I got in slope-intercept form. So let's get in slope-intercept form. So again, we would have this equation, and we would like to get the y by itself, because that's what slope-intercept form is. So I'm going to minus the 5x to both sides. Get negative 3y is equal to negative 5x plus 15. Then I'm going to get rid of the negative 3 by dividing everything. I'm going to get that as y equals 5 over 3x minus 5. And this is my final answer. Well, no, actually that's not my final answer, because that is just my line equation. I didn't say what the slope was yet. So the slope should be that number in front of x, which would be 5/3. So that is now my final answer. If you have any problems today or you get stuck with anything, please let me know. Again, just send me an email or talk to me in class. Either one works. But really be looking over this entire thing. Really use this review to help you figure out what you need to do for the final, because some of us would like some higher scores. So for your grade to go up in the class, you need to do better on the final than you did in the class.